introduce it. So GSG has been invited by SGA and the Sustainability Fund Review Committee to participate in the Sustainability Fund by supporting the creation of a graduate student fee, which will be dedicated to the Sustainability Fund to support current graduate student positions and future environmental initiatives. I am going to let everybody know that my stance in this resolution is neutral, as I think that this decision belongs to the Assembly to make. I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to President Laffin to get into details about this resolution.
I didn't know you also called me President Laffin until just now, but good to know. So yeah, Ellie mentioned that the review committee reached out to us, and Scott and Mark are here to answer questions afterwards that maybe are beyond the scope of Ellie or myself. And the idea of the resolution, the way it's structured, is intentionally malleable in that the amount Ellie and I have proposed is what we foresee as being like perhaps the max amount. If you wanted to amend it higher, of course you could, but our thinking is we can discuss it like top down, and that's why the whereases are broken into different amounts. And so if we as GSG don't feel that the covering the creation of new assistantships or positions is worth it at this point, we could strike that and then make it 8 and 4, and et cetera. But the reason we wanted to bring this forward to you, as Ellie mentioned, we don't feel it's our position to declare that GSG is or isn't for something like this. Obviously, that's why the Assembly exists. But B, the kind of the junction that the Sustainability Fund is at right now is that for a few years now, and in a minute I might ask Mark to provide some more details, the fund has supported graduate assistantships and other positions held by graduate students, in spite of it being entirely funded by undergraduate student fee money. And from my understanding, that probably will not persist. The fund will pivot and focus on undergraduate initiatives if it is continued to be solely funded by undergraduate money. So that baseline of 6 and 3 in chatting with the fund and some sustainability SGA folks is what could like maintain the current level and perhaps some of the assistantships that exist in person. And then as we've written out, an additional 2 and 1 would be enough to cover offsetting all of the carbon emissions from commuting, and then et cetera down. So that's the idea behind this resolution. Mark or Scott, if you have further comments, I would open it up to you if I'm allowed to do that. And then I guess questions afterwards.
I'd be happy to make a comment and add a little bit of perspective to this. Thank you for inviting us to join your meeting. And so I direct the Office of Sustainability, created it in 2007 when the university president, Dr. Moat, joined the American College University President's Climate Commitment and put us on a path toward carbon neutrality. And at the time, we had never measured greenhouse gases. We had no idea what our emissions were. We were really starting from scratch because, as you probably know, carbon emissions are not regulated like other air pollutants. Very shortly after we started the office, the undergraduate student body passed a resolution to create a sustainability fee that escalated over the first few years and has been flat at $12 a semester, $12 for several years now. And I was involved in proposing that we create a University Sustainability Council to advise the president and our office on sustainability initiatives and strategies and policies and track our performance under the climate plan. The undergraduate fee became the University Sustainability Fund. It is the only source of funding that goes into the fund. As part of the Sustainability Council, a sustainability review committee was established that is a student majority committee. I have been and that committee makeup changes every year. So there's a chair, an undergraduate student who's a chair, and then a majority of undergrads on the committee. Myself, as the member of the council, I've been consistently involved in all of their deliberations, and our office administers the fund. So Mark is the fund administrator. So I've been involved in all the meetings over the years, over a dozen years, looking at all these sustainability fund applications. And we have two application deadlines, one October 15th and one January 15th, where the entire campus is solicited for project proposals that could be considered to be funded under the grant. I can tell you that there are projects that were funded that resulted in graduate student positions. There are projects that had direct benefit to graduate students, as well as undergraduate students. And there have been times when the student majority committee really deliberated over funding projects where the primary beneficiary would be a graduate student or graduate students, given that the fund is solely undergraduate student money. We have approached past presidents of this body to gauge interest in participating in the fund. We are very pleased that you've brought a resolution to the table to consider it. Sustainability, of course, in 2007, we had no idea where it was going to go. It was a pretty new term. It was a real change in focus for the university because I'm also responsible for most of the environmental management and compliance programs at the university, and we were very focused on compliance. But shifting beyond compliance and getting into stewardship and sustainability was a new idea. And where we are today is far beyond what any of us imagined back then. I think that supporting the fund by your body would bring not just a representative to the Sustainability Council, which you've had since its inception, but it'll bring representation to the Student Fund Review Committee to review the proposals that come before it. And I have to tell you, they spend a lot of time reviewing these proposals and really deliberating. And I think the graduate student voice at the table has been lacking. And I think if there was support by the graduate students, there would be more proposals submitted that would benefit graduate students as well. Some of the projects that I think about that benefited, that a lot of folks don't know were funded by the Sustainability Fund. I mean, just the Solar Decathlon. I mean, a lot of funding to the Solar Decathlon from the Sustainability Fund. Water filling stations across the campus, 3 rounds of funding provided by the Sustainability Fund, solely by the Sustainability Fund. And the projects go on and on, from Turp Farm to PALS and other programs that have a direct benefit to the graduate students, I think is really important. The issue of commuting is also important. The undergraduate students voted and the council approved a carve out from the University Sustainability Fund to offset undergraduate student commuting emissions. And that has been going on for a couple of years. The graduate student commuting is not being offset, so it goes on to the university's footprint, just like the faculty and staff commuting does as well. But I think that it would be really important to participate in some way and to have a voice at the table and to encourage the campus to increase the number of proposals that benefit graduate students and graduate student positions through the fund. I could tell you that the undergraduate students are seriously discussing increasing their fee, because they want to fund additional internships and other undergraduate student positions. Mark and I held a broad stakeholder Zoom call about a month ago just to gauge a lot of the sustainability folks who are involved in sustainability, different programs across the campus, and it was widespread thought that there would be a lot of opportunity for undergraduate student positions, if there was simply additional funding, a funding stream to support those paid internships. So I thank you for your consideration, and Mark and I are available for any questions you may have.
And if it's helpful, I can show, I did a little bit of counting to, if you want to get into any numbers, to get a bit of a snapshot of how much funding has been, has gone to grad assistantships and projects that have been proposed and implemented by grad students. And then of course, other just projects like water bottle filling stations and other things that are simply, you can't pin down the direct benefit to grad students because it's the sort of thing that everyone on campus benefits from. But I have some rough accounting if you'd like to see any of those numbers, just so you know.
Great. First, I see Laura McBride.
Hi, Laura McBride, Chemistry. Thanks, Mark and Scott, for coming here today to speak with us. So I just have a few questions. So in the resolution, we say that there's assistantships that are about $60,000 per year the sustainability fee covers. What are these assistantships that grad students have? Like, could you describe their title or what they're doing with their assistantship?
Yeah, I might be able to describe that best if I screen share. So give me 1 second here. Let me pull up the spreadsheet. So in the last 5 years, the Sustainability Fund has given grants to various different projects. And some of those projects have requested funding for the full support of a GA. Some have asked for partial support for GAs. These are some of the projects over the last 5 years that were funded. So for instance, just to orient you to the list, so adaptive reuse of existing buildings is a project that's sponsored by a faculty member in architecture. It provides partial work for 3 GAs, and the total award was $6,000 just for the grad assistant position. So obviously these are kind of minimal, positions. Sustainable Technologies project, that's more of your traditional, request of a full grad student. So the way that this adds up is that over the last 5 years, it's averaged about $30,000 per year for these assistantships. I think I was just one discrepancy that was in the resolution. The resolution said 60, which is a doubling of the average. So for assistantships, the direct support is about 30,000 a year. But then separate from that, there are projects that were proposed by graduate students and implemented by grad students. And these are, the expenses here go above and beyond the direct support for the assistantship stipend, right? So, constructing what used to be called the public health garden, which is now the community learning garden. A project to construct a part of the last solar decathlon house, doing research on green roof design and a green facade and so on and so forth. So you can see all of these projects were projects that were proposed by and implemented by grad students, and the costs here go above and beyond those stipend amounts. So the average there is about $22,000 a year in project support for grad student projects. And then I also wanted to include a few other projects, and this is where it gets a little squishy in terms of identifying specifically what's the financial benefit to grad students, right? But trying to answer that question also led me to wanting to flag some projects that are kind of campus-wide in nature, but have some significant grad student benefit. So the Sphagnum Moss pool water treatment system in the Epley Recreation Center. So if any of you enjoy the pool, you happen to be enjoying one of the healthiest pool environments in the country because of the way that we're treating the pool water there. If any of you ever use the composting in Stamp Student Union, that's a project that we funded. I mentioned the water bottle filling stations, various kind of research projects and research labs that have been funded. A new master's degree in sustainability is under development. If any of you have eaten at the Green Tidings food truck that features produce from Turp Farm, which is the University's sustainable farming operation, which is another project that we funded. So anyhow, that's sort of a long-winded answer to how we've supported grad student projects over the years. But I just want to give you sort of the rough lay of the land there.
Great, thanks for that. My other question is, if we were to pass this resolution at the $10 per full-time graduate student or $5 for part-time, how much money is that per year? I don't know what that number comes out to. I don't know if you have that or if Ellie.
Yeah,
have that.
the total amount is about $100,000. So here's the easy rough math to keep in mind. For every $2 paid by a full-time grad student, and the normal rate then for part-time would be half that rate. So consider $2 for a full-time student, $1 for a part-time student equals $20,000. So the easy numbers here are for every $2 increment, you get another $20,000. So the $10 full-time, $5 part-time fee structure equates to $100,000 a year. Approximately in total revenue.
Great, thanks.
Sure.
And then if we were to pass this resolution, when would the fee be implemented? Would that start in fall 2021?
No, there's a delay. So we are doing some groundwork now. And I want to say at the request of student leaders. So the Office of Sustainability has never advocated for increasing student fees. We are the fee administrator because the students asked for this fee and asked us to administer it. So for more than a decade, we've been happily administering at the students' request the student sustainability fee and the sustainability fund. We've been waiting for the day that either the undergrads request a change to their fee or the grad students request the implementation of this fee. This is the only student fee paid by undergrads and not grad students, simply because of the history. This came from the undergrads. Today could be the day that the grad students decide to implement it for themselves. But that's up to you. We are not advocating one way or the other on that. It's always been a student-funded initiative, and we have complete transparency in how the money is spent, and we put students in control of how every single dollar is spent. The fee proposal would be due in fall 2021, and that is a proposal to adjust fees for fall 2022. So this would not influence student fees next year.
Okay, perfect, thank you. And then my last question is just some information on how would you be offsetting the carbon emissions from grad student commuting?
Yeah, so the university has a robust carbon offset program. We became the first large university that we're aware of in the world to go carbon neutral on air travel way back in, I think we started in 2017, offsetting air travel emissions. And that means that we're investing in projects that are located, throughout this region or around the world that are reducing or sequestering the equivalent amount of greenhouse gases that are emitted by all of the, in that case, airplanes that we fly as a university. We fly, in typical years, we fly a whole lot, right? You might do, have a research project in China or a study abroad experience in Rome, right? So we eliminate the climate impact of all of that air travel. In 2018, the SGA unanimously supported a resolution to offset 100% of undergrad student commuting emissions. So through those same investments, we are finding projects that have real additional verifiable carbon reductions that are equivalent to the total carbon footprint of undergraduate student commuting. We would do the same for graduate student commuting. Graduate student commuting in a typical year equates to about 4,000 metric tons of carbon dioxide equivalent. It's a pretty big carbon footprint. So for an estimated cost of $20,000 per year, we could eliminate the climate impact of graduate student commuting.
I would just like to
Thank you.
piggyback on something Mark just mentioned. Our office is responsible for procuring the verified carbon offsets. So we went through a competitive bidding process. We have 2 firms that are under contract for the current period. They submit offsets by project. So they give us a menu of projects. The cost of each offset varies depending on the project. Relative to the undergraduate students and offsetting their commuting off, we consult with them with the list of projects. They have a certain budget they want to stay within, and then we consult with them as to what mix of projects they would like to support. And those are the projects that go through. We would do the same thing with the graduate student representatives if you went down the same road as the undergraduates relative to commuting. We would consult with you as to what projects submitted by the 2 providers would be the mix of projects you'd want to support. But we make sure that the projects are verified, third-party verified, and they are in fact additional, which is very important that they are additional. They're not required by regulation. They're not required for some reason. They are in fact real projects that are additional and provide carbon reduction.
Thank you.
Alec is next.
Yes, I have a couple of questions. First off, could you bring up that Excel spreadsheet again, Mark? Alec Dennis, Business and Management, I should say. Because when I was looking at if you scroll all the way over to the right, the grad assistantships, like the assistantships being provided, are all of those assistantships currently graduate students, or all of them undergrads? Is there a mix, or what exactly is the deal there?
So these specifically are positions for grad students. I excluded any support for undergraduate positions in this table.
And then the award for graduate assistants, like that column G, is that per position, or is that like when these in some of these, like take the net zero energy retrofit initiative, that's partial work for 9 GAs? Is that 23,000 each, or that's 23,000 total?
That's 23,000 total. So this is for this project. This is the total amount of funding that went to these positions. So yeah, you can see there. Obviously, this is for 23,000 for 9 GAs. This was fractional work on top of their or in support of their annual GA-ship, if that makes sense.
So then looking at the average, it seems like the average estimate is a bit high, because 1 full-time GA for the sustainability at 20,000, 3 full-time GAs for the green TERP and green chapters, that's 60,000, so 20,000 each. Partial work, like, are you sure about that average of 29,000?
This is an average over 5 years. So this is simply taking, this is the total amount given over a 5-year period. And this is the average, just dividing this number by 5 years.
So that's the average per year, not the average compensation per graduate assistant.
Correct. Yeah. Sorry, the label's not very clear here.
Okay, so I just wanted to clarify with that. So a couple of follow-up questions then. First off, one of the line items in the resolution is money for additional position. What exactly do you have in mind for that additional position? What would be its duties, and why is it a necessary addition over and above your current responsibilities?
So I wrote that, not Mark, and that's the potentiality of it. The creation of new positions or the proposals for new positions would be funded by that money. And that's kind of why it's as I mentioned, this is a flexible resolution, and it's the last addition to the 10.5. My thought was, like the undergrad's fee, this one would be implemented over so many years. Like it would start whatever 4 and 2, and then I might go to 8 and 4, and then maybe hit 10 and 5, or whatever the breakdown is at that time. there might be more positions, there might be new departments that want GAs for sustainable purposes. And it just creates a bigger pool that graduate students can pull from for sustainability initiatives. So maybe there are positions that weren't funded or assistantships that were proposed that didn't come to fruition, but it was more of a potential creation in my mind when I wrote it.
Yeah, and I'll build on that just a tad, because the undergrads are currently supportive of a proposal of increasing the undergraduate fee from $6 to $15, which is a significant increase. It's also significant that it's the students who are coming forward with that initiative. This is not the administration asking for a fee increase. That was the students, the undergrad students, you know, at least a committee saying, we want to increase this fee. The main reason why they're seeking that fee increase is to fund more student positions, to create more opportunities for students to get involved with the work and implementation and sometimes maintenance of sustainability projects. So I appreciate, Dan, that you included that in the resolution in front of GSG, and I think that roughly aligns with the conversations that the undergrads have been having, that there's so much more work that we could be doing and more positions that we could be funding to do that work.
Though kind of my argument is there's always more work that can be done for everything that is a university function. There's always more money that could be used, more money that could be spent. And so before endorsing a specific fee increase, there needs to be a lot more concreteness towards what would that actually do to be worthwhile. Because speaking for a number of graduate students, there's a lot of concerns about the graduate student fees. We know that assistantships are not exactly generous for a lot of GAs in a lot of positions. And so any fee increase can be problematic, and we would want to make sure that it was actually a worthwhile investment. And then as you were going through several of the initiatives that were funded, most of those weren't things that would benefit grad students. I do not know of a single graduate student who has gone to the pool. I do not know of a single graduate student who has eaten at that food truck. I don't know anybody, I don't know anyone who has, the water filling was the one that I'm like, okay, yes, that is something I have seen some graduate students use, but everything, all of those other ones, none of the, oh, okay, Laura, I stand corrected. There's at least one graduate student who has done that. I'm just saying those are not exactly things that are standard for a lot of graduate students. And so, I mean, I'm just wary of adding on and increasing an additional fee for undetermined, return on investment, if you will.
Well, I might just add to you that, we solicit the entire campus for proposals, and they come from any individual student group, faculty, staff, organization. We never know from year to year what proposals are going to be submitted, right? We get a pool of proposals. They always exceed the amount that's in the fund. And that's where the deliberations go. And, I think if there was, I would hope that there would be an expansion of the proposals that would involve more graduate positions and benefits to graduates, because if you're contributing to the fund, you would be advertising the proposal process and being vested in the proposal process. And I should say that not only is there this review committee that vets the proposals, just so you know how the process works, they go through these deliberations. Some of them, most of them have to go back to the proposer for all kinds of questions and that need to be answered. And then when the review committee approves it, the project is brought to the full sustainability council for review and decision making. And that is the last stop. The council ultimately is the authority that approves projects. And of course, you have representation on the Sustainability Council. So we never know. I mean, it's a bit of a step in the blind faith, in that I can't tell you that if you pass this proposal, that next year there's going to be 3 proposals with graduate student positions in them, or 5 of them or none of them. It depends on what is actually submitted into the proposal process. But
Though my other question is kind of building on one of my earlier comments of, well, what's the actual benefit? What's the actual return? And there's always more that could be done. So is this really the best use of our funding? And by that, what I mean is, is this something that there would be a situation where the fee would go down in the future because we've made these investments, or as soon as we make, once we have this fee increase into, let's say we did $10 today, then in another year or two, it's oh, well, we want 12 because here are 3 new initiatives. Oh, now we want 15 because here's 2 more. Oh, now we want 30, here's a few more. What would be the chances of it actually going down at some point in the future?
I don't see that happening. Like I said, the undergraduate fee has been unchanged since it was adopted 14 years ago. So, and again, it is not the administration, it's not the Office of Sustainability that's driving the fee increases for the undergraduate students. I think they feel that sustainability has become a core value of the university from where it was in 2007. And they want to actively support the campus's carbon neutrality. They want to support sustainability initiatives across the campus. They want to expand opportunities for undergraduates to have paid positions. And they want to have a voice and have standing when it comes to the policy issues and strategies that are employed to, make what the university said in its 2008 strategic plan, a model of a green university.
The last thing I'll say, and then I'll yield the floor to someone else, is to me, there are other student fees that represent a more pressing demand. For instance, we know how stretched thin our mental health services are right now. There are people in my program, I am one of the people who at one point had to wait over 2 months in order to get an appointment made. And what I would say is there are a lot of buildings that are metaphorically on fire. And while sustainability is an important value, it is something we should be thinking about. There are other fees. Like if I was going to vote to increase any fees, it'd be like, let's give some more money to student mental health because we have grad students having mental crises. And while it's great that we're providing funding, that we would be able to provide funding for a handful of new graduate positions, that would be wonderful for those handful of people who are getting that. But money that went towards something like mental health would have much more widespread benefit across the student population. Like I said, I'll yield the floor now, but I just wanted to add that in as one additional thought.
Autumn.
Autumn Perky, GVBT. I'm going to be a harsh critic here, unfortunately. I think some of the bigger picture is being missed here, that we do want to support sustainable outcomes and we want to support improving environment, but asking for increased fees from graduate students is just absurd. I'm adamantly against this resolution as it please because it shows a disregard for current issues with existing fees, and it shows an issue with not respecting the equity issues we are already incurring. So these are the questions I have that I'd like answers for and you guys to be accountable for is why can't departments assume these costs or have the graduate school pay it? That seems like an option that you guys could do instead of, burdening graduate students further. And why should we be paying more when we couldn't get a reduction in fees during COVID, regardless of not having access to resources? And we are already on graduate student stipends, which are limited. And maybe it's only $10, but it can additionally cost something on already limited funds. Like for me, that cost potentially buying my daughter a new outfit, paying for my daughter's activities. Like I already pack my own lunch and you're asking me to do more to limit those funds. And then why are graduate students helping fund positions for additional graduate students? Like why are we paying for graduate students rather than the departments or other places? Like you're basically asking for us to pay for our own employment, which is a little absurd. And then will faculty be paying these benefits? So how are you diverting these between undergraduates and faculty? Because undergraduates are different than graduate students. We're here for careers, we're being trained. We've already had a collective action thing fail because it's very important that we be treated as employees. And you're basically telling us now that we're just students, which I have a big issue with. And then you say that you have 21 graduate assistantships so far. So if we don't pass this resolution, how many graduate assistantships are going to be lost? And if we do pass this resolution, how many graduate assistantships will be gained? Thank you.
I can start with maybe I'll go in reverse order. My understanding of the review committee's position moving forward is they'd all be lost. They wouldn't maintain any of the positions, at least as funded by the fund. And you're right, maybe departments will look at those positions and say, let's find a way to keep them. My understanding is they wouldn't. And the differentiation between departments paying and fees paying isn't so black and white, because a lot of the department budgets are fees anyways. So it's, and even that's a little different because as was mentioned, this fund is entirely student funded and entirely, or at least mostly student determined. So in that sense, I get the point that it feels like we're paying for our own employment, and that's because a lot of this conversation is framed around those assistantships. Not only are they the largest portion of the graduate cost, but in my mind, it's the top priority of the things that we chatted about via this fund that are graduate student relevant. Conceptually speaking, I wish we could reallocate fee money rather than, needing to add to it. I know this is on a live stream, I'm sorry, DOTS, but if I could pull money from DOTS and say, let's put it towards sustainability instead, obviously that would be the preference. But that's not how the system works. Another great example in the chat of maybe a fee that's too high already. It isn't all that relevant to grad student.
I apologize for interrupting, Dan, but in our case, that is how this works. We are not advocating for any student fees. We are here to simply implement whatever the students want, right? If the undergrad said decrease the student fee, that is what we are here to implement. I understand that other fee units are not as responsive to that student request. We are simply here to implement whatever the students want.
Tamara.
Hi, Tamara Allard-Syke here. I have a couple of questions, but I do want to start off by saying, kind of echoing what Dan said, I agree that sustainability should be a #1 priority. And if, we could reallocate fees and get rid of some fees and pay for this fee, I would rather pay this fee than say for athletics or DOTS. But unfortunately, that's not the way it works. So the way the resolution is written, and I'm not sure if this is a question for our guests or if this is a question for Dan. It says that there will be like a $10 fee imposed per graduate student position, per full-time graduate student position. Is that correct? So am I to understand that this isn't a $10 fee, it's a $10 per position fee? Is that correct?
No, it's $10 per student.
Okay, I read it incorrectly. Go ahead.
Well, I'm just rereading to make sure that is written correctly. The
one point of miswriting was the 60,000 per position. It does say that it's $10 cost per graduate student. So it would be $10 per full-time graduate student and a $5 fee per part-time graduate student.
Okay. So then I also wanted to ask, many of these projects that you're discussing, you're talking about, these are like projects that are meant to improve campus in some way. So for example, the refillable water bottle stations, which are great. But are they also going to like research in the area of sustainability? Can you kind of explain maybe some of the more basic science, like is there more basic science that's happening? What's going on with that?
Mark, can you address that?
Yeah, I can jump in on that. Yes, there have been a lot of different research projects that have been funded. An electric vehicle lab in electrical engineering, green roof, several different types of green roof research projects. I mean, frankly, it's a long list. We've funded something like 160 projects to the tune of $3.2 million over the years. So we'd be here all day if I gave you the full laundry list. If you go to sustainabilityfund.umd.edu, you can see a list of all of the grant recipients. But I mean, let me know if you want me to expand. But there have been a lot of different types of research projects that have been funded over the years. Yeah.
Great. I guess the reason I asked that question is actually to address Dan's concern that many graduate positions would be pulled or would be removed, because I'm someone who works in basic science, and I know that science doesn't go on without graduate students. So while I understand that undergraduates are pushing for these funds to go to undergraduate positions, there are some things that undergraduates are not qualified to do. So for example, in engineering, that could take much more highly complicated understanding of coding and modeling and things like that, the undergraduates may not have. So do you, I guess, with that said, do you really think that it's feasible to actually pull all graduate student positions, if we're not paying this fee?
I think, having worked with this review committee, I think it would influence their decision-making not in terms of projects already funded, but it might affect their decision-making in reviewing projects in the future, particularly where there are projects that have the main benefit being graduate students versus undergraduate students. So when you look at the criteria for reviewing proposals, one of the criteria is, what is the benefit of the project to the students? And that is very important criteria, and they hold to that very closely, because we're not doing projects that the university has to do otherwise. They're not projects that are regulatory or already planned. They're projects that oftentimes would never happen if it weren't for the fund, okay? And so I don't think it's going to affect anything that's already funded. But going forward, the undergraduate students who have the majority on this review committee may look at projects in a different light. I can't tell you because the students change every year. Yeah. But it's certainly come up in their deliberations almost every year on some project or another. And I guess I should tell you also that most projects are not fully funded solely by the fund. Most projects, the Sustainability Fund is one of the funding sources to make the project go. So there's often in-kind services provided, other grant money provided, department money contributed. I'll give you an example. All right. So last year, they completed the first phase of restoration of the Campus Creek. Terribly degraded water body that flows to the Paint Branch, goes to the Anacostia, the Chesapeake Bay. The main construction grant to do the restoration was from the Maryland Department of Natural Resources for $1 million. The university was on the hook for the design and permitting. The Sustainability Fund contributed to it. Facilities management contributed to it. Facilities Renewal Fund contributed to it. So it's often used as money to help leverage contributions of other sources of funding to make a project go. And so, to that extent, if there's proposed, for example, some sort of research project that has a graduate student benefit, the department proposing it might say, well, I have half the money, but I'm looking to the fund for the other half to leverage departmental funding. It happens it is a fairly given constant in funding these various projects. Very few of them that have significant dollars are funded solely by the fund. They're usually one or more additional sources of funding to make the project go. And typically there are projects that wouldn't go if it weren't for the fund. Mm-hmm. And I could identify several that over the years like that,
I understand that. And I thank you for kind of being transparent about that and explaining it so clearly. I guess what I'm taking from that though is just having been in the basic science realm, like having an advisor who's deeply involved in grant writing, that if you need grad students for a project, you'll find a way to fund them. And I don't necessarily know if these funds would be necessary. Like if someone needs a grad student for a project, which usually they do, especially basic science related projects, I guess I don't see this fund as being necessary. And it could be funded elsewhere, I guess is my point. That's all of my questions. Sorry.
Yehuda.
UW Computer Science. I took a poll, an informal poll of a number of my fellow students, and the consensus was, please don't raise fees, period, end of story. And it is, I understand, a priority to consider sustainability. At the same time, as we previously mentioned, just the sustainability fund pays out on projects. So if there are no projects that are requests that are submitted that would pay graduate students, it doesn't matter how much we pay in the fee, we wouldn't be paying graduate students. And I would think at the same time, if every project that's submitted is to pay graduate students, then it doesn't matter what the undergrads want. If they're going to fund something, it's going to end up paying a graduate student. So I wouldn't focus on whether graduate students are getting money or not. I think, as I believe it was Autumn said, I would rather, buy clothing for my kids or food than pay another $10 every semester for something where we don't really know where it's going to go and that doesn't have strong support.
To that end, might I make a suggestion for the bill specifically, rather than calling on an increase in student fees by $10, rewrite that to say, we hereby and forthwith call on the athletic student fee to be decreased by $10 and have that money instead be put towards the sustainability fund, so that there's not one extra cent in student fees, and it goes towards something that is far more preferred, I would say, as a graduate student body compared to athletics. Sustainability is something that is a higher priority. And we can just let the university fight out whether they actually want to put their money where their mouth is when they say sustainability is a priority, when they say that this is something we need to do. If they actually mean it, then they would be more than happy to reallocate some of the funds from athletics to sustainability. And if they don't mean it, well, I think that is also rather informative.
So your point is taken. My suggestion would be, if that's something we want to do, maybe we send it back to committee as opposed to trying to rewrite it here, since we've already spent 50 minutes on this piece of legislation, and we could consider it at our next meeting. But that's just a suggestion from the chair, not a...
I 100% support that. And my proposal would then
Directive.
be to table this particular issue, sending it back to committee to rewrite it along the lines that I have just described verbally.
Okay, let's hear what Dan and Yehuda have to say, and then we'll vote on that as a motion, assuming it gets a second, which, given the chat, I think it probably will. Dan.
So I think on message, that would be strong, and it would call on the university to identify priorities and perhaps move in a direction. The problem is that every fee is proposed individually, so and you can't necessarily propose a fee reduction. The department would have had to do that. So you could call on athletics to reduce their fee, and then call on do this again to increase the sustainability fee. At least is my understanding of the process being involved for the first time this year with fees.
To Laura's point, I am deliberately being slightly sassy here. Because
Yeah,
I
then
don't
that would work well.
that they
that makes
will
sense.
change that, but I want to make it painfully clear to everyone where their priorities actually lie. And I think that we have to consider the concerns of affordability, the values of being able to support families on already shoestring budgets. And rather than being forced to pay more fees to support something the university has already publicly declared is a priority of the universities. So I suspect that it will go nowhere, but the fact that it goes nowhere is part of the point I'm trying to make.
Yehuda.
So I have a motion, but first I need a little tiny bit of information. Do we know what the deadline is? Let's say that somehow we were to vote that we supported a fee. What would be the deadline for that vote? Since you said that it wouldn't take effect until after next fall,
That's right. If either of the student governments, SGA or GSG, support any change to a student fee, then the Office of Sustainability will submit a fee adjustment proposal to the Committee for the Review of Student Fees in October. I believe the deadline is sometime in October 2021. So that's the timeline that we're on.
Okay, so we can't motion to move something to a committee for next assembly session because it doesn't work that way. But we can. I will motion to send this back to. I believe we have the Sustainability Committee. I'm looking committees.
You could send it to BFC, I think.
Yeah, BFC is probably.
All right, let's send this to the BFC for a review. Hopefully they can get more information, quantitative information about what graduate students actually want and how such a fee proposal might proceed, or any other similar resolution.
All right, the motion has been heard and seconded. Is there any objection to the motion to refer the bill to the Budget and Finance Committee? Hearing none, the action is approved. The action is so ordered, something like that. All right. Thank you, Mark and Scott, for coming. You're welcome to stay and watch us debate other things that have nothing to do with you, but you're also welcome to leave.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks for considering it. Thank you.
All right. Next up is GSG A40R11, which I will now share my screen to show you. This is a resolution concerning accommodations for graduate students for after the vaccination. Do we have our author here? Yes. If you would like to introduce the bill, please.
Jacek Garbuliński, Department of Aerospace Engineering. So the idea for this resolution came to my mind after I received my shot of the vaccine. I was experiencing side effects such as high fever, chills, and a dull headache for 2 days. Recovering from that also took time. But then I learned that some of my friends had similar stories. And it struck me that although the university is doing their best to lead the fight against COVID-19, there was no clear or standardized guidance on how to approach classwork related deadlines when the side effects hit. And with this resolution, our goal is to change that. The resolution calls on the university to send a message expressing support for the students suffering from the side effects. And it also calls on providing a clear guidance on classwork extensions related to the side effects.
Great. Thank you for that. I'll jump in real quick and just let everyone know we did discuss this with the graduate school at our last meeting. Their position is that this should already be taken care of by existing, illness policies, but that they're not opposed to communicating the idea that this does count under those policies as something that should be provided some flexibility under for both your assistantship and the classes that you take. They think it should apply in both ways. So that's the university's position as of now. Alexander.
I cede my time because I was just going to repeat what apparently the university's position already is. So
Great. Tamara.
I just wanted to say that, first of all, I high support for this. I actually just got my second shot this last weekend, and I experienced a lot of what was already talked about. But additionally, I've already kind of seen that there's varying responses to students saying that they're experiencing side effects from the vaccine. Some people are like very considerate, like my advisor's like, make sure you take Saturday off and you're not working and like expect to be kind of out. And then I've had, professors being somewhat weary, like, well, are you really feeling bad? So I feel like there is a need for this being clarified.
Yehuda.
I don't see anything controversial here, and since we have a full agenda, unless there's some objection, I move to vote.
I would second that motion.
Motion to vote, and it has been seconded. Is there any objection to moving to vote on GSG A40 R11? Hearing no objections. Edie. We'll pull up the poll and leave it open for 30 seconds, as we usually do. As time expires, the yeses are 33s, the nos are 2, and the abstentions are 1. The motion is agreed to. Excellent. In that case, we will move on to GSG A40R12. Employment verification, documentation. Autumn, take it away.
Thank you, Autumn Perky, GVBT. Misty, who is not with us today, I think she's at job interviews. She is the chair of diversity and inclusion, asked me to draft up this resolution. I was able to do it really quickly. Mainly it's just asking that we can get verification of employment status for, assistance programs. I think I've shared with you guys previously an experience I ran into my first year was I applied for the Maryland Child Care Scholarship and got denied because they said I didn't work because of my RA-ship. And this is really all that is. My situation has improved, but again, this is just to try to get all graduate students those protections and ease of getting access to those documents. Thank you.
Excellent. Another thing that we already discussed with the graduate school, they do have a letter posted on their website that departments are encouraged to use that should contain any of the information that is needed. But this obviously could encourage more departments to actually use the letter as opposed to it being available and nobody using it. So that's their position. Yehuda.
Yehuda Katz, computer science. I also applied for the child care scholarship and I'm still waiting. They didn't out of hand deny it without documentation, but documentation definitely helps. I had the same problem with my mortgage though, where they didn't believe I was employed. It's very hard to get documentation, and I am strongly in favor of this resolution.
Given that this is a rather straightforward resolution, I propose a motion to vote or carried by unanimous consent.
Second.
There is a motion and a second. Is there any objection to moving to vote? Hearing none. Edie. And we'll leave the voting open for our customary 30 seconds. With time to vote expiring, the yeses are 34, the noes are 0, and the abstentions are 0. The motion is agreed to. Moving to GSG A40R13, which you should be able to see now, maybe not, I'm just going to do it. A resolution calling for equity and transparency of overload positions. Once again, Autumn or Tamara.
You want me to start, Tamara, and you can take it over?
That's good.
Okay, guys, I've talked about this several times, Autumn Perky, GBBT, and you know, like, and dependent upon your situation, often you need more money in graduate school. I had kids, I needed more money. My ex wasn't paying child support, really bad situation. Something I noticed though is that often overloads were given just by happenstance, like you talk to a professor, you have a shared interest, happens in the hallway. But sometimes we have students within our departments who are like dealing with food insecurity, like they literally cannot buy food, and these overload positions make a big difference for them. That's not discrediting anything about the people who are best suited to do positions, but all of us can teach and different things like that. So it's really just asking for the university to find a better way to communicate these. I left flexibility in this because I think requiring them to do e-jobs, I don't know if you guys have messed with that at all, but e-jobs is really hard to navigate. I've been doing it for my partner who's on the job market. So I wanted to give them that flexibility, and that's why that's not mentioned there.
Yeah, so I'll just kind of go off of what Autumn said. This particular resolution kind of came to light actually after I was offered an overload TA-ship for, you know, a class. I was like, anyone could teach this, and I don't necessarily like need this money right now. I mean, although all grad students could probably need more money at any one given time, you know, coming to think that there are, you know, student parents who probably could use the money more. There are some students who are also making more money off of their assistantships. Like I know in my department specifically, some students get GRFPs, for example, which are, you know, provide $10,000 extra funding over what is normal for a graduate student per year. And those people probably don't or shouldn't be offered these overload credits. For example, when you have students who are, you know, just struggling to pay for food or struggling to care for their children. And so I guess the purpose of this was just for departments to really consider need when they're offering these overload assistantships, and they're not just offering them to one person, but they're making them the departments or people who are eligible to do this or who have the skills to do a specific overload TA-ship or RA-ship or GA-ship, that everyone's aware, right? So that there's, you know, equitable access to it.
Great. Anna.
Hi, Anna Posberg, kinesiology. First, I am a big supporter of this resolution, so thank you, Tamara and Autumn, for bringing it to the fore. In my department, overloads are based on favoritism for who decides who gets what position. And often the positions are outsourced to other departments before offered to internally our department. Yeah, I'm looking at Tamara's face and I'm like, yes, that is exactly my reaction. So big proponent of this. I have a question in terms of the logistics of how you would suggest increasing transparency. Would this be like an online sort of database that's way easier to navigate than e-jobs, or an email that goes out in the listserv? How do you envision this kind of coming into fruition?
I think when Autumn talks about there being flexibility in this resolution, that's really where the flexibility is. We could be more specific. We could ask for an online database. You know, the graduate school is currently redoing their website, which we'll probably talk about in the next resolution. Not something we could ask for. But like at the same time, it could be as simple as sending out an email to everyone in the department. Like it could be really easy for departments to just, instead of sending me an email, you send everyone the email. And then the people who are interested respond.
Add on to what Tamara said, I think this, one of the, what I see as a good way to do this would be to attach it to department emails that go out once a month, or even like the college level emails. I'm in BSOS, we get those every month. I know something in my department that I'm working with my advisor doing, because I am in a good position because my advisor is also the department chair, that I can talk a lot about these things. And so it's like, why don't we just keep a list of graduate students we know who have these issues, and if we like have these positions, take care of them so that they're taken care of. Like this is also about departments taking care of their students, which I think is something that underlies what is missing at this university.
Great. I agree with all of that and appreciate the flexibility of that depending on the department. My only guess, like minor follow-up question or thought, something to think about is based on like the need, like if it's based on need, I agree with that. But would that fall on the onus of the student then to indicate their need? Because that kind of then redirects to putting the responsibility on the student. That can be really uncomfortable, those conversations to have a lot of times. So perhaps something to think about, not pushing back, big supporter of this. Thank you for bringing it forward. But just perhaps something to think about in terms of that flexibility and the logistics of it. But thank you both.
I fully understand your concern about putting the onus on the students. I agree. It would be better if departments would, have an understanding that some students are struggling and some students aren't, and to respond accordingly. That said, I think that there is, I don't know, it's probably a skill that grad students, everyone can improve at, is indicating when you need help. Because I feel like, so I actually had mentioned something to my advisor about summer funding. I think that a lot of grad students struggle over the summer because you get that, hopefully you get that Dean's Fellowship, right? And that will support you $2,500 over the summer. I'm like, that doesn't pay my rent and food and energy costs, right? And so I mentioned that to my advisor, and she actually brought it up with the department, and something changed and they offered an additional fellowship. And so while I understand like the scary part about indicating that, I think that, I don't know, it feels like it's an important skill to learn to ask when you need help. So something I would encourage grad students to practice.
I second everything Tamara said, and I do feel bad that we have to put it on the graduate students. I didn't want to talk about being a graduate student parent because I was like, being a single mom, I'm going to be ostracized in my capabilities to perform my job duties, which is not the case at all. But I think in this case, being advocates is something as graduate students we have to be really good at, as she already kind of keyed into. And I think that's why we're all here, is that we know we have to advocate for graduate students, and maybe we
Yehuda.
UW Cats Computer Science. I again appreciate the intent of this resolution, but I am concerned about the actual implementation. The university is currently working on a massive overhaul of hiring systems and student information systems, which they claim is just a few years down the road, and we'll see how well that goes. But in the meantime, I don't know any department that I've worked with that will do absolutely any additional work to advertise positions or to fill positions or maintain databases. One day the university, when they have a combined hiring, job board and financial payroll system, this will be easier because you just create your job and everyone can see it. But my department with 200 and some grad students is not going to keep a list of people's personal financial need. And we already send out emails with job availability, job opportunities, and people don't read them. I talk to people, I tell them that these jobs are available, and they say, oh, I didn't know. How do you know? Well, it was in the department monthly email. You didn't read it. So I don't see how any of this is actually going to help. That's just,
I can.
Go ahead, Autumn.
Okay, so I'm going to respond to that, Yehuda, and I think you're keying into something that is a problem with GSG overall, is that we have very limited power and very limited capability. And maybe nothing happens. Like, your department sounds great. Like, they're able to communicate with those. My department, it's all behind the scenes stuff. It's like, oh, I met someone in the hallway. Oh, we decided we have these RA ships, but we're going to give it to this person. Or it goes on in a way that's such that the DGSs make a determination without your input. So maybe all this will do is bring attention to the fact that there are issues that these departments should be aware of. And I think in some fields, like for me, when I picture this, I think the STEM fields, this will get shoved to the side and ignored, which I think is wrong. I think social sciences will be more mindful of this, but I think that's a problem. It's just maybe about getting them to pay attention right now. I'll pass it to Tamara.
I think Autumn put it really nicely. I agree, like I said, that my experience has not been the same as yours, Yehuda. My department, again, like they tend to, like, oh, well, you said you were interested in this and you seem reliable, and so we're going to offer this to you. And I don't understand, like, I don't know why it's me. Like, why are you, like, I don't know, like, am I, like, I don't know why I'm getting singled out. It's like, why aren't you sending these to other people? or like, why aren't you sending these out to the department? Because these are not in department emails. And that's all I'm asking for, is that the opportunity is there, right? That people are aware of the opportunity, and maybe not all departments adhere to this. I think we had addressed this to the department heads also for that reason, but I guess like that's on them, and you know, if they choose not to do what we ask, I mean, that's our limited power, unfortunately.
Alec.
I was just going to propose a motion to vote.
There is a motion to vote. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion has been heard and seconded. Any objection to moving to vote? Seeing none. Edie? And with time expiring, the yeses are 30, the noes are 4, and the abstentions are 3. The motion carries. Next up, you guessed it, GSG A40R14. A resolution calling for building a campus-wide seminar information website. Do we have our author here? Oh, there you are. Go for it.
This is Eric, Geographical Sciences. So this is a resolution calling for building a campus-wide seminar information website. So the background is currently each department disperses their own seminar information via email, and it's kind of hard or inconvenient for graduate students to collect campus-wide seminar information, especially for graduate students who are doing interdisciplinary research. And colleagues do send weekly email, but for example, I'm in BSOS, and in BSOS weekly email newsletter, it only includes like the seminar information at the college level, while never include the academic seminar information at the departmental level, which are actually most useful for graduate students. So based on that, we're calling for the graduate school to either create a new website that includes a campus-wide seminar list, or like when they redesign the website, the renovation of the website include the creation of a campus-wide seminar list, or either create a calendar that include campus-wide seminar information. And additionally, this resolution requests the graduate students are recruited or hired to help develop and manage this website as graduate assistants. So that's the basic idea of this resolution.
I just wanted to add on to that, because I guess something that like I myself would come back with is, well, you know, you can use the like course search just to find the seminar courses, but this is specifically making recommendations also for colloquium, which are not listed in the course list anywhere. And the idea is that this would help create interdisciplinary research and interdisciplinary relationships across departments.
Thank you both. Another thing that we've already discussed with the graduate school, see, when you send us your resolutions early and we have a graduate school meeting, we just get the ball rolling already. The deans seemed intrigued by the idea of creating a calendar of some kind that colleges and schools put, or colleges and departments put seminar information on, and to encourage the use of that, so that there would be one big Google Calendar that anybody could go to look at any seminar that happened to be being offered on a particular day. So not running into a lot of opposition. Whether or not, it's technically going to happen, or, whether departments would actually use it, that's a whole different question, but the graduate school at least is supportive. Jacek.
Oh, yeah, thank you, Eric and Tamara, for this resolution. I just want to say that I'm a huge supporter of it, especially because many times I learned last minute that there is some very cool seminar happening, at the School of Engineering, but it just happens to be at a different department. And then sometimes I don't have time on my calendar to attend. But if I had known it earlier, if there was some campus-wide seminar list, I could plan ahead and just enjoy the seminars across the campus that are of my interest. And so I just want to say a big thanks, and also to Simon for explaining a little bit of how it is with the graduate school.
Rob.
Rob Delka, physics. I just have a quick point of information where it says the GSG in the first, therefore, the GSG requests the graduate school to include this campus-wide seminar list. And I was wondering if there's any position or anyone within the graduate school we could direct this towards that would be more specific, because Simon, as you said, all the deans thought this was an intriguing idea and that people would use it, but I could see a lot of people thinking that and no one actually doing it. So I didn't know if there was a more direct way we could get this done.
Great question. I can't think of anyone that I'd be like, they for sure need to know it. It seemed like Dean Roberts was pretty intrigued by it, and I think he's in charge of the website redesign, or involved in it, in charge, to the extent that anyone's in charge, who knows. So I don't know that there's anyone more specific than that really needs to know about it, but maybe there's ideas in the chat since I see it. Okay. Jen says, yeah, Dean Roberts.
I just wanted to briefly respond to some of the comments. I saw someone had said, maybe we should add a deadline for departments to upload seminars and colloquium. That way, it creates more urgency with actually getting these things uploaded. But I agree with what Yehuda said, which is that oftentimes there are talks that are maybe even unassociated with a colloquium or a seminar that a department might want to upload that happens halfway through the semester. And if we impose one deadline, that talk will get excluded from the calendar.
Or we could put up Alexander's business management. We could also alternatively just put it up so that, hey, list it at least 2 weeks prior to the event happening. So then there's still a deadline so that we know that that is in the mind, but then if there's a rolling thing in the middle of the semester, okay, have it. So that might work as a compromise.
Yehuda.
Yehuda Katz, computer science. I understand every department has different levels of technical expertise. In our department, again, as a large department, we have multiple talks every day. The schedule changes constantly. If the graduate school could pull our calendar automatically, we give them a feed off our website and they update their calendar automatically, then everyone would probably be fine with that. There's no one who's going to sit and add our hundreds of events every semester to the graduate school website. If the graduate school had some way to pull in department calendars, this might work. Otherwise, it's going to turn into lots of stale information. I can also tell you, as someone who receives a copy of every single support ticket opened with the computer science help desk, the number of emails that we get from people when either they saw a calendar event and it goes to the wrong, the event didn't happen quite like it says on the calendar, or the links just don't work. We get probably at least one request a day like that, some days even more. And we just say, sorry, whoever curates that information is going to have to help you. We can't do anything about it. And I see if the grad school requires you to manually update this type of information, that's what it's going to turn into.
Yeah, I agree. I could easily see that happening. One thing I think that is nice about this resolution is that it does have this built-in therefore clause about asking for graduate students to be hired to help with the management and the maintenance of this site. I don't know if that might be the sticking point for the grad school. They're like, well, we're willing to do like a calendar, but we're not willing to hire a graduate student to do this. But I mean, this resolution does have, like a provision for that, right? For that circumstance. That's someone who's, I don't know, maybe working part-time on a GA ship, responsible for uploading these events as they come through.
We did discuss with the graduate school the possibility of it sort of auto updating and pulling from department websites. And the general consensus was department websites are not nearly standardized enough to really allow that to happen.
Well, that's the challenge.
Anybody who's been to multiple department websites could easily tell you. Any other questions, comments, concerns on GSG A14, A40, R14?
Motion to vote.
A motion to vote. Is there a second?
Second.
The motion has been heard and seconded. Is there any objection to moving to vote? Hearing none. Edie, thank you. With the time to vote expiring, the yeses are 29, the noes are 3, and the abstentions are 4. The motion is agreed to. Next up, for those of you playing along at home, is GSG A40R15. Resolution to ensure the best possible graduate student representation on external committees.
One quick point of information.
Yes.
Given that this particular bill is also by the same author of the GSG, like the resolution of censure, should both of these be discussed simultaneously in executive session, or should we discuss this first in open session before switching to the second?
That's a great question. I think that this is probably the way to go, is to do this one first and then move into executive session to discuss the other one. Just knowing the content of both of these resolutions, I think it's totally fine the way it is.
Okay, I just wanted to check. Thank you.
Yep, absolutely reasonable question. So, the author of the resolution, Mr. Yuda Katz.
UW Katz Computer Science. We talked earlier about student fees, and the university requires that student fees be distributed with the input of students. And there are a lot of different committees. There's, athletics has a committee, and there's the campus transportation advisory committee, and the what's now called the Information Technology Advisory Committee, and there is the Facilities Fund and the Sustainability Fund, and there might be one or two others that I'm missing. But each of them has students who are selected to sit on the committee to provide input on how our money is spent. And it is the job of the representative bodies of the university, the SGA and the GSG, to select representatives to these committees who will best represent the interests of the students they represent, which, some committees need that more than others. You wouldn't necessarily need someone who's a structural engineer to be on the Facilities Fund committee. But you probably might not, you might want someone who knows more about technology to be on the technology fee committee, just as an example. Since those are the only committees I've been on, I can't speak to the qualifications that you might want for people on other committees. But we've had incidents where the GSG selected someone and the committee chair, who is a SGA appointed student, decided that they don't want that person on the committee. And that does not serve the best interests necessarily of graduate students. So this is a resolution calling on the SGA to require the committee chairs that they appoint to actually accept the representatives that we appoint.
Rob.
Quick point of information. Why is the current setup such that like the committee chair can reject GSG's appointees? What's the history there?
I think it's written that way anywhere. It's just what happens. A lot of these committees also used to be structured differently. The SGA wasn't quite as involved. When I started on a campus fee committee as an undergrad a long time ago, the committee members were chosen by the various deans. So the dean's office sent out an email to all the different departments saying we need a representative from one of these departments to represent our college in this fee committee. And the departments would find candidates and send them to the dean, and then the dean would send their choice of representative to the fee committee. Over the last few years, the SGA has decided that they care more about how these committees are structured, and they had a push to take over. I can tell you, again, on a committee I was on, undergraduate students proposed a bylaws change that would automatically make, the way it used to work was the students would get together at the first meeting of the semester and elect a chair internally. And the SGA proposed a bylaws amendment to let them choose the chair of the committee. And as a GSG representative, I fought strongly against that, but we literally were outvoted on party lines, undergrads to grad students. And I still feel strongly that the SGA should not have that power. We pay, for a lot of these things, we pay the same amount they pay. And there's absolutely no reason they should automatically have control of the proceedings of these meetings. So that's sort of the history behind this, how we got to where we are. Did I answer the question?
Yes, sorry. Thank you, Yehuda.
Apologies for being muted when I was trying to speak. Daniel.
Yeah, hi. Computer science, Daniel Smolyak. I was just curious what the exact situation was where an SGA rep actually voted down one of our committee members, since I feel like that might also inform our context for.
We'll talk about that next. This is a high-level overview discussion.
Okay, and then my other question was, so do we have an alternate structure in mind to the one that you just talked about, as far as like how chairs should be elected and things like that?
I would love to say chairs should be selected, appointed from within the committee. Elected within each appointed committee. That ship has sailed already, I think. I don't know that we'll be able to go back, but the SGA and their selected people should not have a say in who the GSG chooses to represent the graduate students. That's what this resolution is.
Okay. Thank you.
I mean, if someone wanted to propose a resolution that said that the committee makeup should change, that's a different resolution, obviously.
Anna.
Anna Posberg, kinesiology. So this talk about fees, just for like transparency, I sit on the athletic fee committee. So like happy to have that conversation about like why that is the case. And I'm not defending athletics. I'd actually like to get rid of it. But like that's a conversation for another day. My question, Yehuda, so like the way I'm kind of taking this is to like ensure that there is graduate student representation on these external committees. Because my experience with the athletic fee committee is we don't really have a committee chair. It's run by athletics and we're all invited to come and discuss the fee. So like I agree with ensuring for graduate student representation. And if the structure is with other committees to have SGA in charge, that seems a bit perplexing to me. So like agree with this. It's not been my experience, but those are the keys that I'm taking away from it. Correct me if I'm wrong. And I do agree with them.
No, as I said, I know that every committee has to set its own bylaws and they're not all structured exactly the same. The committees I have experience with, and at least a few others, are chaired by undergrads in their bylaws.
Great. Okay, cool. Thank you for that clarification and thank you for bringing this forward.
Autumn.
Autumn Perky, GVBT. Thank you, Yehuda, for bringing this forward. I think this is really important. I want to share a personal point of information. I've discussed this with Simon, and sometimes our treatments on these committees are like we're less than, and we're highly disregarded. I'm sure you guys saw the sexual harassment or the Title IX survey that was sent out to you originally that I made the mistake of realizing that graduate students weren't included on that. So I think there are deeper issues within some of these committees that Yehuda is just starting to crack the cake on, or however you want to phrase that. So thank you, Yehuda, for bringing that forward. And I think these are things that we do need to work on. Thank you.
Laura McBride.
Laura McBride, chemistry. And I just want to say I 100% support this. There should be no reason, unless the grad student is doing something completely against the bylaws or completely inappropriate, that they should be removed by the committee chair or SGA. And just because they don't want them there isn't a reason that they should be removed. Because if we as GSG appoint these students to be our representatives on the committee, then they should be there. So I completely support this resolution.
Alec.
Yeah, I would kind of echo Alec Dennis, business and management. I kind of echo Laura's comments here. I mean, if there are cases where, you know, a GSG member were to not show up routinely to the meeting, then I think it'd be okay to bounce them. Like if there's certain like standards of behavior that need to be upheld, but just on a principle level, I don't think it's a good precedent to set to allow undergraduates to say, yeah, the person who the GSG has decided to entrust with the responsibility of being on this committee, we're not going to accept that. And that just kind of further feeds into this idea of us being, like Autumn's point about us being less than or not equivalent partners to the undergrads. And so it's one of those things where I feel like we really, like, they have no business in telling us who we choose to represent our votes and our interests. You know, like I said, absent, you know, some sort of compelling, hey, there was, you know, maladministration, breaking of bylaws, we should be able to submit like a turtle if we wanted to be our representative, an actual terrapin. And they'd have to, you know, ask the terrapin for their opinion. That's at least kind of my perspective. If we think the terrapin is the best representative, then go Terps.
New motion to appoint only terrapins to external committees. All external committees.
Wait, then I don't think we'd have a voice in any committee at that point because terrapins can't talk.
Well, they could hobble towards the answer. We just put down like, do you want to vote this up or down? We put a piece of lettuce next to the one. And
I'll add those to the transition documents. We'll leave that for next year.
Anything else on this resolution?
Motion to vote.
Been a motion to vote. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion has been heard and seconded. We will leave the voting open for our customary 30 seconds. With the time to vote expiring, the yeses are 35, the noes are 0, and the abstentions are 0. The motion is agreed to.
Thank you.
At this point in our agenda, we are going to move into executive session to discuss a resolution that was requested to be discussed in executive session. If